Imagine this: God grants you the very thing you've been begging for, but instead of drawing closer to Him, you drift away. What if the blessing was never meant to end the prayer, but to begin something even greater? There's something peculiar about the way we humans respond to blessings. It's almost as if we have this unspoken habit of turning to God only when we're desperate, when we've hit rock bottom, or when life feels completely out of control. In those moments, our prayers become raw, real, and relentless. We plead, we bargain, we pour our hearts out, promising God everything if He would just answer us. But what happens when He does? What happens when the answer finally comes and the weight we carried for so long is lifted? You'd think we'd stay in that place of gratitude, of devotion, right? But strangely enough, for many, that's when the prayers start to fade. The urgency is gone. The cries for help are no longer needed. Slowly, almost without realizing it, we move on, not just from the problem, but in some cases from God Himself. It's a pattern as old as time. When life is hard, we cling to God like He's the only lifeline keeping us afloat. But when things start going our way, when the storms calm and the blessings roll in, it's easy to forget. We may still believe in Him, even love Him, but that intimate, desperate connection we once had, it starts to slip away. Take a moment to think about this. How many people have cried out to God in the middle of financial ruin, begging for provision, only to stop praying altogether after they land a stable job? How many have pleaded with God for healing or restoration, only to neglect Him once their bodies or relationships were made whole again? How many have prayed for success, only to let the success itself consume their time and focus, leaving little room for the one who made it all possible? It's not that we do it on purpose. No one wakes up one morning and decides to forget about God. It's far more subtle than that. We get comfortable, we get busy, we tell ourselves we'll pray tomorrow, or that God knows our hearts even if we don't say it out loud. And while all of that might be true, the connection we once had with Him, the one forged in the fire of our trials, starts to feel distant. But here's the thing: God never gives us blessings to replace Him. He never answers our prayers so we can walk away. In fact, those blessings are meant to draw us even closer. They're reminders of His faithfulness, His love, and His desire to be a part of every season in our lives, not just the hard ones. Think about the Israelites. They cried out to God for deliverance from Egypt, and He answered in a way no one could have imagined. He split the Red Sea, provided manna from heaven, and guided them with pillars of cloud and fire. Yet, as soon as they reached the other side of the struggle, how quickly did they forget? They grumbled, they turned to idols, and they lost sight of the God who had worked miracles on their behalf. It's a sobering reminder that the human heart is prone to wander. Even when we've seen God's goodness firsthand, we can still lose sight of Him if we're not careful. But it doesn't have to be that way. What if instead of letting blessings lull us into complacency, we let them fuel our devotion? Imagine receiving that job you prayed for and using it as an opportunity to thank God daily, not just for the provision, but for the ability to work and serve others. Imagine being healed and letting that healing drive you to worship, to share your testimony, and to encourage others in their own struggles. Imagine your prayers being answered and deciding in that moment that you would pray even more, not out of desperation, but out of love, gratitude, and a desire to stay connected to the one who answered. Because here's the truth: blessings aren't the end of the story, they're just the beginning. God doesn't just want to meet your needs, He wants to walk with you every step of the way. He wants to be the center of your joy, not just the solution to your pain. And when we see blessings through that lens, they take on a whole new meaning. They become a reminder of His presence, His care, and His constant invitation to draw closer. So the next time you find yourself on the receiving end of God's goodness, pause and think about this. Don't let the blessing become the end of your prayers. Let it be the spark that keeps them alive. Because the greatest gift isn't the blessing itself, it's the relationship with the one who gives it. When we think about prayer, we often see it as a means to an end, a way to ask God for help, guidance, or provision when we need it most. And while it's true that prayer is our lifeline in times of trouble, it's also so much more than that. It's the way we connect with the creator of the universe, the one who made us and loves us beyond measure. But here's the part we often forget. God doesn't answer our prayers just to solve our problems. He answers them to bring us closer to Him. You see, God is not a distant figure sitting far away, handing out blessings like rewards for good behavior. He's deeply personal. He's involved. He wants a relationship with us, one that's not just based on what we need, but on who He is. And that's the thing we often miss when we finally receive the answer to our prayers. We think the story ends there, but in reality, it's just the beginning. Imagine a father whose child comes to him asking for something they desperately want. The father listens, he cares, and he provides. But what happens after? Does the child stop talking to the father? Does the relationship end once the gift is given? Of course not, or at least it shouldn't. The gift isn't the point, the relationship is. And that's how it is with God. The Bible is full of examples that show us this truth. Take the story of the Israelites. They were enslaved in Egypt, crying out to God for freedom, and God heard them. He sent Moses, performed miraculous signs, and led them out of bondage. It was a breathtaking display of His power and faithfulness. But what happened after they crossed the Red Sea? The prayer stopped. The gratitude faded. And before long, they were grumbling, complaining, and turning to idols. It's a heartbreaking pattern, but it's not just their story, it's ours too. How many times have we cried out to God in desperation, only to forget Him once the crisis has passed? How many times have we been so focused on the blessing that we've overlooked the one who gave it? But God, in His infinite love and patience, doesn't give up on us. He keeps calling us back, reminding us that the blessing was never meant to replace Him. Instead, it's meant to draw us closer. Every answered prayer is an invitation not just to thank God, but to know Him more deeply. When you think about it, blessings are like signposts. They point us to God's goodness, His faithfulness, and His presence in our lives. They remind us that He's not just a God who hears us. He's a God who cares enough to act. But if we stop at the blessing, we miss the bigger picture. It's like receiving a beautiful letter from a loved one and being so captivated by the handwriting that we forget to read the words. The truth is, God doesn't want our relationship with Him to be transactional. He's not just a provider, He's a father, a friend, a guide. He wants to walk with us through every season of life, not just the hard times, but the good ones too. And when we receive blessings, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that we've somehow made it, or that the answer to our prayers is the finish line. But that's exactly where we miss the point. The truth is, the blessings we receive are not the conclusion of our prayers. They're meant to be the starting point of a deeper relationship with God. Think about it. When God answers your prayer, He's not just giving you what you ask for, He's giving you the opportunity to grow closer to Him. But too often, once we get what we want, we forget about the one who gave it to us. We become distracted, complacent, or simply take our blessings for granted. But the truth is, the greatest gift isn't the provision, it's the relationship. Imagine a couple who has been longing for a child. They've prayed for years, and when the child finally arrives, they're overjoyed. They thank God, they celebrate, and they vow to cherish every moment. But then, as time goes on, the routine of life sets in. The child grows, the couple gets busier, and the relationship takes a back seat. They still love the child, but they're no longer as present or as intentional about nurturing the bond. In a way, this is what happens with our relationship with God. When He answers our prayers, we're often so focused on the blessing itself that we forget to nurture the relationship. We assume that since we've received what we've asked for, we no longer need to stay as close. But the opposite is true. The blessing is an invitation, not just to thank God, but to keep the relationship alive and thriving. The Bible is filled with examples of people who received blessings and then turned away. One of the most poignant examples is in the story of the Israelites. God led them out of Egypt with a mighty hand, parting the Red Sea, providing manna from heaven, guiding them with a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. But as soon as they were no longer in crisis, they stopped seeking God in the same way. They grew complacent, they began to grumble, and they even turned to idols. God had delivered them from slavery, but they lost sight of the one who had done it. This isn't just a story about the Israelites. It's a story about all of us. How many times have we cried out to God in desperation, only to forget Him once we've received what we've asked for? How many times have we neglected to pray, to give thanks, or to seek His will because we've been so consumed by the blessing itself? It's easy to fall into this pattern because we live in a world that teaches us to focus on what we have, what we've achieved, and what we've earned. The more blessings we accumulate, the more we think we can stand on our own. But the truth is, the more blessings we receive, the more we need to keep our hearts aligned with God. The more we should be seeking Him, not less. Think about it this way: when God answers your prayer, it's not a sign that the relationship is over, it's a sign that it's just beginning. God doesn't want to answer your prayers and have you walk away. He wants to answer your prayers so that you can walk with Him hand in hand into the next chapter of your life. He wants to be with you in the highs and the lows and the blessings and the struggles, because He knows that the relationship is the most important thing. When you continue to pray after the blessing, you're telling God, I'm not here for what you can give me. I'm here for you. You're telling Him, I want to walk with you. Not just through the struggles, but through the successes too. You're acknowledging that the true blessing is not the answered prayer, but the closeness you have with Him. And let me tell you, this is when the magic happens. This is when the relationship deepens. When your heart expands and when you begin to see God not just as a provider, but as the source of all your joy, peace, and fulfillment. It's in these moments that you begin to realize that the blessings were never about you at all. They were about your connection with Him. So the next time God answers your prayer, don't let the blessing be the end of your story. Let it be the beginning of a deeper walk with Him. Keep praying, keep seeking, and keep drawing near. Because the greatest gift He gives isn't the answer to your prayer, it's the relationship that grows in the process. And that, my friend, is worth more than anything else you could ever receive. When God answers our prayers, it's not just about the solution to the problem, it's an opportunity. It's an invitation to draw nearer to Him, to deepen the relationship, and to keep the conversation alive. But how do we do that? How do we continue to pray even after we've received the very thing we've been asking for? It's not always easy, especially when we feel like the urgency has faded. But there are simple, powerful ways to keep that fire of connection burning even when life is good, even when the blessings flow. First, it starts with the heart. Gratitude is the key. If God has answered your prayer, it's because He cares. And the natural response to His care is thankfulness. But we can't let that thankfulness be a one-time thing. It's easy to thank God when you first receive the blessing, but what about when the excitement fades, when the new job becomes just another job, or the healing feels like the new normal? Gratitude needs to be a daily habit, not just a fleeting feeling. When you wake up in the morning, take a moment to thank God for everything He's already done. Thank Him for the blessings, for His presence, and for His love. Thank Him even when everything seems calm, even when life is predictable. Because the truth is, the more we thank Him, the more our hearts remain focused on Him. Gratitude shifts our perspective. It reminds us that we are not self-sufficient. Everything we have is a gift from God. And when we recognize that, we draw closer to Him. Second, consider others. It's easy to get wrapped up in our own blessings, but God's heart is always for others. After receiving what we've prayed for, it's essential to turn outward, to pray for those still in need, and to help those who are struggling. Praying for others isn't just an act of kindness, it's a way to keep our hearts humble. It reminds us that God's blessings aren't just for us to hoard, they're meant to be shared. It also keeps us connected to God's greater purpose for our lives. When we continue to pray for others, it aligns us with His will and keeps us mindful of the bigger picture. And let me tell you, when you shift your focus from your own needs to the needs of others, your prayers take on a whole new depth. They become more selfless, more in tune with God's heart. Then there's the power of reflection. When we look back at what God has done for us, it's easy to forget how much He's answered our prayers. We become so focused on the present moment that we lose sight of the bigger story. But reflection is a powerful tool. Take time to think about what God has already done in your life. Reflect on the answered prayers, on the breakthroughs, and on the blessings. When you look back, you'll see His faithfulness in ways you might have missed. Reflection brings perspective. It reminds you that God has been with you all along, even when you didn't notice. And that reflection should lead to even more prayer. Because when you remember how good God has been, you'll want to keep that connection going. You'll want to keep talking to Him, keep seeking Him, and keep acknowledging His goodness in your life. Another way to keep praying after the breakthrough is to stay engaged in the Word of God. The Bible is full of wisdom, promises, and reminders of who God is. It's easy to stop reading the Bible once we feel like we've got everything we need. But the Bible isn't just a book of instructions, it's a living conversation with God. When we continue to read it, we stay grounded in His truth and we remind ourselves of the bigger picture. God speaks to us through His Word, and when we make time for it, we are staying close to Him. You don't have to read hours a day to make a difference. Even a few minutes of focused reflection on Scripture can keep your heart aligned with God's will. Finally, never forget the power of community. It's easy to think that when God blesses us, we're on our own journey and it's just between us and God. But the truth is, we were never meant to walk this life alone. Being part of a community of believers helps us stay grounded, stay focused, and stay encouraged. It's easy to get distracted or forget to pray when we're isolated. But when we surround ourselves with others who are seeking God, it strengthens our own commitment. Share your blessings with others, encourage them in their struggles, and be open to being encouraged in return. The body of Christ is meant to support one another, and it's in community that we find the strength to continue praying, even when life is going well. It's not about the occasional prayer or the big asks. It's about creating a lifestyle of ongoing connection with God. The blessings we receive should draw us closer, not make us complacent. And when we talk about God answering our prayers, it's easy to imagine the moment of relief, the feeling of everything falling into place after long seasons of struggle or waiting. We picture the moment when the phone call comes, when the door opens, when the breakthrough finally arrives. But that's just the beginning of the story. What happens next? Once we have what we've been asking for, how do we keep the conversation with God alive? How do we keep drawing closer, not just to the blessings, but to the one who gave them? The first thing to realize is that the moment you receive the blessing isn't a signal, that you can now take a break from God. It's easy to think, well, I asked for this and I got it, so mission accomplished. But God didn't answer your prayer to end the relationship. He answered it to deepen it. The blessings you receive are not just rewards for your faith or for your perseverance. They are tools meant to help you draw closer to Him. When you stop praying after receiving what you asked for, it's like saying, thanks for the gift, but I don't need you anymore. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The blessing isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of a new chapter in your walk with God. One way to keep the connection alive is by recognizing the purpose of the blessing. God didn't give you what you wanted simply for your own comfort or enjoyment. He gave it to bring you into a deeper understanding of His love, His grace, and His plans for you. That new job, that healed relationship, that financial breakthrough, they're all signs of God's faithfulness and His desire to be actively involved in every aspect of your life. When you begin to view your blessings as invitations to know God more deeply, your relationship with Him will only grow stronger. Instead of seeing your answered prayer as a final destination, see it as a stepping stone to a deeper intimacy with the Creator. Another way to stay engaged with God after the blessing is to use your new circumstances to serve others. Think about it. If God has answered your prayer, you're now in a position to bless others. Whether it's the job that allows you to give more generously, the health that enables you to serve in new ways, or the peace in your home that gives you the time and energy to reach out, your blessings aren't meant to be hoarded. They are meant to be shared. When we use the gifts we've received to help others, it keeps us connected to God's bigger picture. It shifts the focus from our own comfort to the needs of those around us, and in doing so, we draw nearer to God's heart. He has blessed you to be a blessing, and the more you pour out, the more He will pour into your life. It's also important to keep praying, even when you feel like you've already received what you needed. Prayer isn't just about asking for things, it's about maintaining that connection with God. It's a way to stay in His presence, to listen to His voice, and to realign your heart with His will. Just because you've received what you've prayed for doesn't mean the communication should stop. In fact, now is the time to pray even more fervently, to thank God for what He's done, and to ask Him to show you how to use your blessing for His glory. Prayer in this sense becomes less about presenting a list of requests and more about ongoing dialogue with the one who knows you intimately. When you pray after the blessing, you're acknowledging that your need for God doesn't end with the solution. You're saying, I need you just as much now as I did before. Reflection is another powerful way to stay connected after receiving what you prayed for. Take time to look back on your journey. Remember where you were before the blessing, how God worked in your life, and how He answered your prayers. This reflection helps keep your heart humble and reminds you that the blessing is not just the result of your efforts, it's the result of God's faithfulness and love. When you reflect on the journey, you're reminded of how much God has done for you, and that gratitude becomes fuel for ongoing prayer. It also deepens your trust in Him. If God was faithful before, He will be faithful again, and you can confidently move forward knowing that He is with you every step of the way. But perhaps the most important thing is this: don't let your blessings draw you away from God. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that you can handle things on your own now that you've received what you've asked for. You start to focus more on the blessing itself than on the one who gave it to you. This is a subtle danger, but one that can be incredibly damaging to your relationship with God. The more you get, the more you need to stay close to Him. The more you receive, the more you should rely on Him, because it's not the blessing that sustains you, it's the one who gives it. The more you get, the more you should recognize how much you still need God to guide you, to keep you humble, and to show you the next steps. So when God answers your prayer, don't let the blessing become the reason you stop seeking Him. Instead, let it be the catalyst that propels you into an even deeper relationship with Him. Keep praying, keep thanking, keep serving, and keep reflecting. Let the answered prayer remind you that you are never self-sufficient, that you need God in every season of life. When you do, you'll discover that the best part of the blessing is not the gift itself, it's the deeper intimacy with the one who gave it to you. When we talk about God's favor, we often picture an end result, a moment when we've reached the pinnacle of success or when everything seems to align perfectly. But what if I told you that God's favor isn't just about the destination, but about the journey? What if I told you that even when life seems to be moving at a slower pace or things aren't quite where you want them to be, God's favor is still at work in your life? The truth is, God's favor isn't just a momentary blessing or a quick fix to our problems. It's a continuous flowing river of His presence, His grace, and His guidance. It's an active force in your life that, even when things don't look perfect, is moving behind the scenes to position you for greater things. It's not always about getting exactly what you want when you want it. It's about the fact that God is with you, leading you and shaping you into the person He has called you to be. One of the key signs of God's favor is when He starts to give you opportunities that you couldn't have earned on your own. It's not that you're perfect or that you've got everything figured out, but God opens doors for you in ways that defy logic or human effort. You find yourself in situations where on paper you shouldn't have a chance. You're offered opportunities that seem impossible, yet somehow you're chosen. These are moments when you know deep down that it's God's favor at work, not your own abilities. And it's during these moments that you're reminded of something important. It's not about what you can do on your own, but about what God can do through you. However, God's favor doesn't always look like instant success or an immediate breakthrough. Sometimes His favor shows up in more subtle ways. It could be the peace that surpasses all understanding when you're going through a storm, the strength to persevere when you feel like giving up, or the wisdom to make decisions that you know are guided by something greater than yourself. Favor isn't always about getting exactly what you prayed for. Sometimes it's about receiving what you didn't even know you needed. It's about the unseen blessings that quietly change the course of your life in ways you may not even realize until much later. Another sign of God's favor is when He places people in your life who help guide you, support you, or open new doors for you. These people may not always be the ones you expected, and they may not always come at the time you want, but when you look back, you realize that they were sent for a reason. Maybe it's a mentor who challenges you to grow, a friend who encourages you to keep going, or a stranger who offers you exactly what you need at just the right moment. These people are instruments of God's favor in your life, and their influence can help propel you toward your destiny. But God's favor isn't just about what we can get. It's about the transformation that happens within us as we receive it. When God blesses you with His favor, it's never just for your benefit. It's always about making you more like Him. His favor doesn't just elevate your circumstances, it elevates your character. It helps you grow in humility, patience, and gratitude. It teaches you to rely on Him more than on your own abilities, and it reminds you that your worth is not found in what you accomplish, but in who you are in Christ. The more you experience God's favor, the more you realize that it's not about receiving more, it's about becoming more like the person God created you to be. And let's not forget that sometimes the sign of God's favor is that He allows us to go through challenging situations. It's easy to think that God's favor means everything goes smoothly and easily, but the reality is that God often allows us to walk through tough seasons to refine us. These seasons may not feel like favor in the moment, but they're part of His plan to shape us, strengthen us, and prepare us for greater things ahead. It's in these moments that we learn to trust God more deeply, to lean on Him when things don't make sense, and to experience His faithfulness in ways that we wouldn't have if everything were easy. The ultimate sign of God's favor is found in the person of Jesus Christ. God's favor is most clearly seen in His love for us, expressed through the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. Jesus didn't just come to answer our prayers or fulfill our wishes. He came to restore our relationship with God. His death and resurrection opened the way for us to experience God's favor on a level we could never have imagined, favor that is not based on our performance, but on His grace. Through Jesus, we have access to God's favor in a way that wasn't possible before. And that favor is freely given, not earned. It's the ultimate demonstration of God's love for us. So when you look at your life, don't just focus on what you can see on the surface. God's favor isn't just about what you have or what you've achieved. It's about the unseen, the moments of peace, the people He places in your life, the opportunities that seem too good to be true, and the quiet ways He is shaping you into the person He's called you to be. Trust that even in the waiting, in the moments that don't seem to make sense, God's favor is still at work. It's the invisible thread weaving through your story, and it's leading you to places far greater than you could ever imagine. Keep trusting, keep seeking, and keep walking in the favor of God. He is with you, and His favor will never fail you. What has God blessed you with that you're most grateful for? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about the ways His favor has shown up in your life. And if this message spoke to you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an opportunity to stay connected with God's truth. Share this video with someone who needs the reminder to stay close to God, especially after He's blessed them. Let's spread this message of His ongoing favor and love to as many people as possible. Stay blessed and keep walking in His favor.
Beneath the stars we whisper dreams. A violin plays soft, it seems. The night unfolds its velvet wings. We dance on air like fancy things. A crescendo builds with every beat. Our hearts, they dance in perfect heat. The world is ours in silent screams. We're floating high on whispering dreams. Together we are one sweet song. The night won't be too late, too long. Our melody will carry on in every note where we belong. The orchestra, it swells to life. The strings, they cut the dark like a knife. Your voice an echo in my soul. In every verse we find the goal. Oh, violins, they cry so pure. In every touch we find the cure. Your hand in mine, the music flows. In whispered dreams, the magic grows. Together we beneath